Welcome to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, the daily talk show with the voice of Penn State football and men's basketball. You never know what special guest may stop on by any given day. Now here's the man of the hour, Mr. Steve Jones.
A brilliant job by Kyle Leff last night. Thank you, sir, for the excellent work.
Thank you. No, I am not a good free throw shooter. So before anyone asks, I am not great.
Yeah. Didn't even think about that. I don't know. It's lost by 5 last night. And I think it took them like 12 to 14 minutes to realize they were just as good as that team. Please, I mean, don't start getting into this mode of, oh, it's Michigan State. Michigan State's good, but so's Penn State. And it took Penn State too long. They gave them too much respect for too long. Then all of a sudden they started realizing, I think, that, oh, wait a minute. We're just as good as they are. That's why they kept making runs at them. Michigan State's got Illinois this weekend. That's going to be very interesting. And the game is at Breslin. Is Michigan State playing with confidence? Yes. Was their confidence at times shaken last night by Penn State? Yes, because Penn State kept making runs at them. Penn State, again, though, had to play shorthanded. And this is an issue because you play Oregon. So you played, the last 2 teams you played are ranked in the top 12. Mm-hmm. And you lost them by a whopping grand total of 6 points. Well, you played one of them without Ace Baldwin.
Mm-hmm. Your best player. One
of the top 10 players in the conference. Okay. You get him back. The only day he practiced was Tuesday. Right? I had a feeling on Monday he was going to be able to go, but like Tuesday's the day he practiced. Yeah. Okay. He was gassed at the end of that game. And he had to play the game without Puff Johnson. Yeah. Now, we're going to find out it's Puff's right hand, wrist, whatever it is. We're going to find out how long-term, short-term that is. Not sure yet. And they're not practicing today. Today's an off day. But you had to play without him. Now you've got to change your rotations. Now and some things that you've got to, it changes your communication on defense because he is your best communicator on defense. Mm-hmm. There's no getting around it. And it's one of those where, as a fan, you would never know that. I'm saying that with all due respect because when you're at the game, it's loud enough and you can't hear the players talk.
Yes.
When you're at practice and there's nobody around, you can hear who's doing the talking and Puff's the one that does the talking.
And for anyone who's seen this Penn State team pressing off at full 90 feet, you see him at the top of it and he's shouting everything out. He's pointing every direction. He's the one running the show.
Right.
I mean, and he's as good as they get.
I mean, he's like I said, as a fan of the game, you really would never really know that because of the noise in the arena. You can't hear, right? Unless you're really right on top of the court. Maybe you could. But when you're in a practice and the arena's empty, you know who does the talking. And that's a big difference. And so not having him really hurt. Along the way.
And you saw it yesterday in the rotations the players had, as you mentioned. Ace went full 40 minutes. Zach Hicks went 37, and DeMarco Dunn went 35. They played heavy minutes. But those two, along with Ace being back, were the bright spots. I mean, both went 4 for 7 from 3. DeMarco played lights out. Zach put up, all of his points in the last 5 minutes of the game and was just on a scorcher. Like, it was both of them impressed.
That's the best game I've seen DeMarco play in a while. And they needed DeMarco Dunn to play. And then all of a sudden, 4:42 to go in the game. Zach Hicks has no points. He's 0-3. He finally gets fouled, hits a couple of free throws, and then he bangs in 4 threes. You're like going, what the heck?
And none of them were straight up easy. A lot of them were over defenders, on angles, falling away slightly, and just everything swish. Just straight in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happens when you're confident.
Right. So they score 85 again. They score. That's not the issue. We all know Mike has based a lot of this on defense. and they need to be a better defensive player, a better defensive team. There's no question about that. Yannick can't commit fouls 40 feet from the basket. I mean, I know you're trying to do something there, and he wasn't trying to steal it, but he got overzealous, and it's clearly a foul. I mean,
he hip-checked a defender.
Right. You can't do that, especially when you're shorthanded to begin with. Now you got to play the rest of the game without him.
He also shoved, I think it was Cooper or whichever of the big men it was from Michigan State after he missed a shot, shoved him in frustration, got his fourth or fifth foul at that point. It was like, oh, come on, Yannick. It was tough.
Now, here's a frustration for Mike, and this will be something I am going to bring up on the coaches show tonight. Penn State has had these tough, close losses. Okay, 1 point, 5 points, 6 points. Right? Mike's career, games like that, he has a winning percentage that's like 72%. He loves coaching games in the final 6 minutes. I mean, relishes it, loves it, doesn't shy away from it, like embraces it, like enjoys it. And they've only won one of those. And that's going to be frustrating for him.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the other night, okay, let's take Oregon. The other evening, it was a 4 o'clock game. The other evening against Oregon. Again, this is where not having Ace. What happened on the final 4 possessions for Penn State? Or what didn't happen? There wasn't a single pass in the final 4 possessions. The person that got the ball took the shot.
Ball stuck.
In other words, you got to get the ball hot. Ace makes the ball hot when he's out there.
And you can see it yesterday. That ball was flying. As after the first 5-10 minutes, that ball was flying around. It was moving. There was movement. I mean, that's what led to DeMarco playing so well. As he was flying around everywhere. And Ace makes everyone better around him, and that's a positive. And they missed him against Oregon, and they missed him in the second half against Illinois. Yes, that game is very different because they lost by 39 points, but still, it would have helped to have Ace at his best.
Right. I mean, look, it's just sometimes you put a line through a game, and you're like, okay.
You throw the tape in a dumpster, you burn it, and you never let anyone see it ever again.
Now, Mike didn't. Mike showed them the tape. I mean, as a coach, you certainly feel like there's an obligation to go through and like with teaching moments.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, there may not be any tougher stretches than this Penn State team had this past week.
We knew going in.
Yeah.
We knew once they got. We knew it was going to be that way. So let's put it this way. Now, Rutgers plays at Nebraska tonight. This is one where the Big Ten didn't do them any favors. But the scheduling thing with 18 schools is just difficult. I mean, Mick Cronin was talking about coming east to play Rutgers, Maryland. I mean, I get it. Ooh. Bob Uecker passed away.
Yeah. Bob Uecker, longtime voice of the Brewers.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a minute here. And so, I mean, look, the teams that go out west, we have to do it once. Right? The Illinois, I think Brian Barnhart was telling me he did the Citrus Bowl and it flew from there right to Seattle. And they played
Washington. And then
I'm guessing Oregon. What? He had to go to Portland because they play Oregon first, and they blew them out. They blew Oregon. They blew them out. They blew like 116 to 77 or some nutty score. It was like 39 points. And then they went to Seattle and they won a tight one over Washington. But I mean, the travel part is difficult for everybody. But Rutgers, they've got Nebraska tonight. But it's the 9 o'clock Eastern time game.
It's late.
Now, in all likelihood, they're probably going to fly back to Newark tonight. when the game's over and get back early in the morning. Tomorrow's a wasted day. You probably have the day off anyway. Saturday they'll practice. Sunday they'll get on a bus. They'll play here Monday night. I mean, in that situation, advantage Penn State. Now, we'll see if it turns out to be an advantage because you're talking about Harper and Bailey, really good players. But, that's, again, this stuff's hard. Penn State, when they go out to Iowa, they're just going to stay on the road. They're going to play Friday night at Iowa. So, I think Bob's on that trip. All right, we're going to go out Thursday, play Friday night, the late game. I think it's the 9 p.m. game, which is fine. Right? Stay overnight, fly to Ypsilanti, probably. I'm going to guess on Saturday, practice there Sunday, play the game at Michigan on Monday night, then come back.
Yeah,
everybody's had to do something like that to make this work, and that's the way it is.
It's never going to be easy. Anyone who thought it was doesn't understand rocket science, apparently.
Well, no. Again, what the Big Ten is attempting to do is not easy because of the 4 West Coast teams. Now, bringing in Washington and Oregon did not make it more difficult. You already had the West Coast thing anyway, and you're only playing one West Coast grouping a year. Penn State goes out to Oregon and Washington next year for basketball. Football, Penn State has one West Coast trip every year. Next year is UCLA. The year after that will be Washington. The year after that will be Oregon. And then back to USC the 5th year. But this sequencing is not easy. And, for everybody. I'm talking about everybody. It's worse for them. Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA have to make 5 of these trips east a year in one form or another. Look, if you're going to play Nebraska and Iowa, you still have to go east. It's not as far, but you still have to do it. And this is somebody said, why do they take so long to put out football schedules and dates and things like that? Because they're still trying to figure all of it out. The it's not doing the schedule, it's the sequencing of the schedules.
Yeah. And this past season was their first one. So they got an idea of what worked, what didn't work. I assume they got feedback from everybody and were like, hey.
And they're going to do this for basketball, too.
It's going to take a couple years for them to get it down to a science where it makes sense, where then, like I see it on the Oregon basketball schedule, they have, for example, Michigan and Michigan State on February 5th and February 8th, which makes sense because I assume they're going to probably end up staying out in Michigan, similar to what Penn State does for the Iowa-Michigan trip.
Everything they do is a 2-game trip. When Oregon came here, they played at Ohio State first, then they came here.
Which, again, is logical, but there's going to be, I'm guessing, more of that, and they're going to try and find ways to tweak it and make it better and improve.
But they have to do it 5 times to get to 10 road games. Now, look, some of those, like road trip, for example, is an Oregon-Washington trip or something like that.
They're in Washington on the 9th. They're in UCLA on the 30th of January. So, it makes sense.
So they've got that, like the old Pac-12 days. They've got that. But still, it's something that I give the Big Ten credit for what they've done. Football-wise, 14 West Coast games. 8 of the schools had a bye week the next week, including Penn State, because remember they had the bye after USC, then they played at Wisconsin. The other 6 had home games the next week. When Penn State plays at UCLA this year, they're coming back and they're playing a home game with Northwestern the week after. So there's that kind of sequencing. And I give them credit. Bob Uecker.
Mr. Baseball.
First of all, have you ever really listened to him do a game?
I've listened in parts. I can't say listen to a whole game, but
because of Sirius XM, I've had the chance to listen to him do some games. He was a terrific baseball announcer. Terrific baseball announcer. And feel for the game, loved the Brewers, loved the city of Milwaukee, loved them. And, as an entertainer, look, he was Mr. Belvedere, the TV show. He made other TV appearances during the course of his career, but he had his own show.
He was on Major League.
Right? In Major League. Oof. In Major League 1 and 2, I don't know if they wrote that stuff for him. Like when Vince Scully did For the Love of the Game, the Kevin Costner movie where he throws the perfect game for the Detroit Tigers, Vince Scully does the broadcast. And he went to the director and he said, I'm a little uncomfortable here. He said, I haven't received a script yet. And he looked at me and goes, you don't seem to understand. You're Vince Scully. He says, just call the game. And he ad-libbed the whole thing.
Jeez.
Right? Okay. Yankee Stadium, the cathedral, has a chapel. I mean, that's him. That's Vince Scully. Well, Euchre was like that. Except he was, a riot. Yeah. I had a big grand slam once. He said, made the final 13-2. Right? Yeah. How do you catch a knuckleball? He says, go. When it stops rolling, you pick it up. Right? Over and over and over, stuff like that. Yet he is a great baseball mind. And I'll give you an example of that. Jim Spence wrote a book, who was at ABC for years, and they were doing Monday Night Baseball. And I read Jim Spence's book. It was excellent. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff as to how ABC operated with Monday Night Football, Monday Night Baseball, the Olympics. Really, really terrific stuff. Monday Night Baseball, the Yankees were playing Detroit. And this was the year of a pitcher by the name of Mark the Bird Fidrich. Rookie, talked to the baseball, patted the mound, won 19 games. He was the starting pitcher in the All-Star game in that year. Obviously, arm trouble got him, but he was the phenomenon. And so this is before the All-Star game. So it's Monday Night Baseball, and the team was Bob Prince, Warner Wolf, he was in the Howard Cosell role, and Bob Euchre. Well, Spence says they get down to a production meeting. They said, okay, who are we going to feature here? And the producers, who are all from New York, they're all from New York. I mean, it still happens today. It's like, ridiculous.
New York, L.A.
Yeah. We're going to feature Ken Holtzman. We're looking at each other like, Ken Holtzman? What are we featuring Ken Holtzman for? They said, we want to feature Mark Fidrich. They go, no, you don't understand. They said, Ken Holtzman is the Yankees starting pitcher and has won games in the last 3 years in the World Series. They're like, what are you talking about? They said, this guy is the phenomenon. And Euchre's arguing with them behind, again, we always hear Euchre with all the funny lines. But he had a great sports and baseball acumen. All right? And he's arguing with them saying, you can't do this. This is the guy we need to feature. And, of course, he got shot down, and in the opening, they feature Ken Holtzman. When the game was over, everybody was talking about Mark the Bird Fidrich. Fidrich threw a complete game. Detroit won the game. He was talking to the ball. He's patting them. He's doing all the stuff, all the antics he did during the course of the game. Right? But that was his, that was his feel for the game. The New York guys had no feel for the game. Oh, it's Holtzman. But it's like, guys, do you watch baseball? Are you into what's going on? But that's the way Euchre was. He may have been funny and had 1,000 one-liners, but he knew his sport. He had a feel for his sport. And I thought, when I listened to him, That's one of the great things about Sirius XM. I know, we're terrestrial radio and the whole thing, blah, blah, blah. Honestly, I don't care. I live in the real world.
Yeah.
All right. Management doesn't, but I live in the real world. I mean, I have the ability to hear somebody else do some games. I'm going to listen. And he's terrific. Really good at it. And you could not tell he was 90 years old. He sounded like a guy doing the game in his 60s. Right? And it's a real it's a shame that, but 90 years old, what a great life. What a great life.
As good as they get. One of the best.
I mean, he played for the Phillies, he played for a lot of different teams along the way.
He, by the way, hosted Saturday Night Live and WrestleMania, which I did not know.
Yeah.
So just an incredible.
Milwaukee meant everything to him because that's the first team that signed him. Yeah. He was with the Milwaukee Braves, obviously, not the Brewers.
Yeah. He also was born in Milwaukee on January 26th, 1934. And he apparently the back of his baseball card said he was born in 35, and he never corrected them until 2014. Yeah. And he was like, hey, it's my 80th.
Yeah. He was on the Cardinals 64 team that won the World Series as a backup catcher, right, to Tim McCarver. He said, I had 2 career highlights. He says, I got an intentional walk one time from Sandy Koufax. He says, I got out in a rundown against the Mets.
Hey, those are 2 highlights right there.
And he got to be friends with Bud Selig. The Seligs, of course, were the ones that owned the Brewers. Selig was the one that bought the team, moved them from Seattle to Milwaukee. But in a serious moment, they asked him about what all this meant. He said to be able to do a game each and every day throughout the summer and talk to people every day at 6:30 for a night game, you become a part of people's families. He says, I know that because I get mail from people that tell me that. That's part of the reward for being here, just to be recognized by the way you talk, the way you describe a game, whatever. And he's right about that. He's right about that. When he got put into the Hall of Fame in 2003, he says, look, and this is not sour grapes by any means. I still think I should have gone in here as a player. I mean, he just was a funny guy. All those Miller Lite commercials he did, right? Mr. Belvedere, by the way, had 122 episodes. Not exactly the 13 weeks and out.
No.
Okay. Major League.
I can hear
Harry
some of his calls.
Doyle.
I can hear vividly in my head. I haven't seen Major League in years. I can hear his voice in Major League and all of the things he was saying and the things he was doing. Like, all of it's in my brain.
Right.
And
just a bit outside. Ball 4, ball 8, ball 12. How could be laying off pitches? Right. Monty. Right. And then I think it's Major League too. The Indians are in a deep slump. Okay, they're now the Guardians. Okay,
in the movie,
the Indians are in a deep slump. Monty, take over. I'm gone. He puts his head down, and Monty comes on and goes, "Fly ball, caught." All right. Well, then the Indians in their own dugout get into a fight with each other, and the Red Sox are looking over like, what the heck? Right? And Euchre pops himself up. The Indians, for the first time in weeks, showing signs of life. He says, I tell you, Vaughn's going to keep that right hand up. Like the whole movie. He says, time now for another edition of TV Talk. He says, in case you haven't noticed, and based on the attendance you haven't, where do we find this guy? I'm telling you, they didn't write that stuff. He had to have ad-libbed a whole ton of that stuff. They probably looked at him as a guy because Major League One was filmed in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Right? Now, 2 was filmed down in Baltimore. Okay? But Oh, now he gets serious about his health later in life because he'd had heart surgery, and so he started swimming literally every day. And he says, I signed with the Milwaukee Braves for $3,000. That bothered my dad at the time because he didn't have that kind of but he eventually scraped it together. So when I came up to bat with 3 men on and 2 outs in the ninth, then they looked at the other team's dugout and they were already in street clothes. Oh, man.
The best there was.
They had the euchre seats in the upper deck. It was an obstructed seat for $1. And you know what? There are certain people in life. Everybody is unique unto themselves. Like take Jerry Valeri. No, people are unique unto themselves. Euchre is the definition of that. Really, I mean, just
incredible.
Well, no. Did I ever meet him? Same room? Never. I never was around him one time in my life. So I just watched from afar. But there are some people that they get into shtick, and then over a period of time it becomes shtick. And you're like, all right, it doesn't have the same effect as it did the first how many times you heard them, whatever. It was never shtick with him. He was like just naturally a funny guy. He didn't do the same things twice. Didn't have the same lines twice. But when it came time to be serious, he was serious. When the Brewers recently have had some great teams, he was really into, like he loved the city of Milwaukee. He loved the Brewers. He may have done Mr. Belvedere in Hollywood. He was a guy that loved Milwaukee. And special guy.
Yeah. I do have, following up on euchre, to a different topic, because while we were on the road for this Penn State basketball trip,
something happened.
A lot of players for Penn State have been returning, going into the portal, going into the draft. And I feel like it's a good thing to just go through where Penn State is at right now. Of course, because the portal is not completely closed. It'll officially be done as soon as the Ohio State Notre Dame game wraps up, and then there's days
the
afterwards.
Portal's done for Penn State.
Well, the players themselves and those two teams can leave.
Those two teams are the only ones that have a 5-day window. Penn State's portal is now done. Right? Now, there's that 48-hour window, but today's the last part of that 48-hour window. Or in other words, you had to put it in on Tuesday, but sometimes the processing just in case. Okay.
And so where Penn State sits right now, players that are draft eligible that are returning in 2025 that have announced it, Drew Aller, quarterback, both Katron Allen and Nick Singleton at running back. You have, on the offensive side, Nick Dawkins is returning. You also have J.B. Nelson coming on back. Then on the defensive side of things, Dom DeLuca, Denai Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, I believe Smith Vilber and Zakee Wheatley have also announced they're returning. You also then have Tyler Dzansky, Riley Thompson, Gabe Wosu, and Ryan Barker all returning as well to the Penn State team.
It's more than that. Some guys don't announce.
Yeah. These are just the guys that have announced it, and it's been talked about in terms of...
So let's go into that for a moment. What about the other guys announcing?
No.
It doesn't take long to tell everybody how this works.
Yes.
Because that's one thing that happens with Penn State and Penn State football. The moment a guy puts his name into the transfer portal, like within minutes, that person's name is removed from the roster. Right?
Yeah.
If you go into the draft, they don't.
Yes.
So, for example, you mentioned DeLuca. I'm announcing I'm coming back. Well, he's still there. Liam Clifford's still on there. Okay. A.J. Harris still there. Zakee, of course, there. Caden Saunders still there. Tracy's still there. Dakari Nelson, Elliott Washington, DeJuan Lane, Singleton. Carter's name. He's in the draft, but he's still on there because you could draft out. Anthony Ivy. Johnny Mitchell's going to be a good player, by the way.
Tyson Denmark, I believe.
Denmark, I mentioned. Allen, Rojas, Smolik, Aller. Okay, now Vanover's out of eligibility, but still there. Khalil Dinkins, he hasn't announced anything, but Khalil Dinkins is still on the roster. Right, so I mean, I'm just telling you that.
Yeah.
In other words, if he put his name in, he'd be off the roster.
And in terms of players, by the way,
Grunkemeyer, Wosley, Schlaffer, Granville, Brown, Lambert, Malachi Williams, Babu Torre, Antoine Belgrave Shorter, Tamir Robinson, Corey Smith, Quentin Martin, Cam Wallace, Lamont Payne, Zane Durant, okay, Carson Kieswetter.
There's a lot of players.
No,
still
Davian
in.
Collins, okay, Emil Davis, Kerry Jackson, Logan Cunningham, Colin Dinkins, outstanding on special teams. Keon Wiley's going to be a good player for them. Denai Dennis Sutton, Holsworth, Blaze Minnick. Let's see, Zariah Fisher. Zariah Fisher's going to be an important player for them next year. Okay, he is, again, his work ethic is unparalleled. And he's had to overcome so much where that work ethic has been on display. Ty Blanding, Anthony Specca. Now, Kobe King's still here because he declared for the draft. Here's a guy nobody's talking about. I thought Mason Robinson made great strides in the preseason until he got hurt. All right? Well, he's going to be back. You know, now Elsden's out of eligibility. Jalen Harvey's got a great future. Warren, of course, is in the draft. Let's see. Dzansky's back. Cooper Cousins, Alonzo Ford, Dom Ruley, Nick Dawkins, Xavier Gilliam, okay? Chimney Ono, Joseph Mpoye. Now, Mpoye is interesting because the light goes on at different times for different people. He's a redshirt freshman. He started to really make some strides. Now he has to continue to make strides, but he's put himself into a position for me of bears watching. Okay, J.B. Nelson. Okay, let's see, Alex Birchmeyer, Egan Boyer. I'll tell you, they really like Boyer. They like Boyer a lot. Drew Shelton, Donko, Venga Ioane, Nolan Rucci. Okay, Caleb Brewer. He bears watching. Javen Williams. Let's see. Ethan Black, Jake Spencer, Peter Gonzalez. Okay, Peter Gonzalez. We all know he got hurt. We all know he was hurt in high school at one point. I know where he is on his rehab because Peter talks to me all the time. Okay, I'm not going to get into that. Because that's whatever he wants to volunteer to me stays there. But he bears watching. I thought in camp until he got hurt. I thought he put himself in a spot to get a long, hard look. Luke Reynolds. Rapelier comes back. Let's see. Smith Vilbert. Ryan Barker. Right? DeAndre Cook's interesting. Riley Thompson. Jordan Mayer. Gabe Wosu. I mean, they're all on the roster. Okay, so here we are, about the 48-hour part from transfer portal and or draft declaration. I'm telling you who's on the roster.
The players that have departed early for the draft, to just go through the list, you've got Abdul Carter, Jalen Kimber, Kobe King, and KJ Winston. The players that have departed for the transfer portal, players that were not on that list, you've got, of course, Bo Perbula left earlier. He is going to Missouri. You have Trey Wallace, Amari Evans, Makai Flowers, Tyler Johnson, Faisal Olue, Jerry Cross, T.A. Cunningham, Tyrese Mills, and then Cam Miller, who today is announced he's going to Rutgers, is the team he's going to, I believe.
Who's going to Rutgers?
Cam Miller is going to Rutgers, Jerry Cross to Memphis.
Okay. And I know that Trey is visiting Texas A&M, South Carolina. I mean, in other words, he's doing what I thought he would do. I thought he'd go be closer to home. His family's from Montgomery, Alabama. So, and there are a couple of things that come into play here. Number one, the players that want to be here. Like you're talking about guys that want to be here. They went through this experience and they want to give it one more run. Two, you have to have the money, which they will have, for roster retention. You're going to watch a game on Monday night where that comes into play. because a year ago, I thought for sure that JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Denzel Burke, Travion Henderson, and Emeka Ibuka were all going to leave.
Mm-hmm. It's a fair assumption.
Right? All of them came back. Why? Roster retention money.
And those are two words you've brought up before, and I want to focus on because on this Penn State team, the word roster retention, there's one place I look roster retention-wise where I don't see a better team in college football next season, and I know I'm stating the obvious. Penn State is going to run the ball like no man's business, not just because of the running backs, but because of the offensive line. You're bringing back Dawkins and Nelson, both returning on the O-line. You've got more players who are getting better, like Rucci, and Donko's going to be back, and you've got Cooper Cousins still here. Like that, they have held it together. They're going to be older, better, stronger, and you've got two of the best running backs in college football.
Well, except for Wormley, they're all back.
Yeah, everyone's back.
I mean, Cooper Cousins. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to take Anthony Donko rehab wise. I mean, that's if I were to give you an idea, I'd only be throwing a dart and guessing, and that's not fair to the audience. But like they've got all those guys back,
and they also added TJ Shanahan from A&M.
Right. Plus they've got the tight ends. Dinkins is
one of the best blockers.
Blocker, but he's a good receiver. Dinkins is a good player. You know, Reynolds, Rapplier back to go with everything else. You got your quarterback back. You've got Ross coming in from Troy. Now, I've never seen. I may have seen Troy play one time. I can't tell you anything about Ross other than what I've heard about him. Hudson, I know a lot about.
You saw him play.
I mean, but I also, but you're also watching tape to get ready for the game. Then you watch the game. I go, hey, the guy can play. I think it would not. Now, guys like Denmark and Saunders and Gonzalez and Clifford and so forth. Okay. In that mix, and then we'll see what Anthony Ivy does. But you feel like it wouldn't hurt the cause if there was one more transfer in as a wideout. I don't know if anybody's available, if anybody's going to visit. No idea. I don't think it would hurt if you got another safety to visit, because getting King Mack to transfer in is huge.
He slots in, as we've discussed on this show numerous times. He slots in immediately onto that defense. We know how it's going to work.
Having your entire kicking operation back, you cannot put a price on. You don't have to replace your long snapper. You don't have to replace your holder. You don't have to replace your kicker, your kickoff guy, your punter. You have to do any of that. Right? It's also the same three guys back on punt protection if Justin elects to just go with those three guys, Don Ruley and so forth. Ruley, Cousins, and Luke Reynolds.
It's
that's if he wants to go that way.
I guess the biggest piece of what Penn State has lost in terms of the players that have exhausted eligibility would probably be the interior of the defensive line, because both Keziah Izzard and Devon J. Thomas both are out of eligibility.
Right.
So both of them are gone, but you've got Zane Durant coming back.
Alonzo Ford. Now, how long it takes Ford on his rehab will be interesting.
Because he was great when he was playing.
Xavier Gilliam is an excellent prospect. Ty Blanding. And then they have a transfer in from Michigan.
And Waffley.
Yep. So, they've done a good job with this. And now there's going to be another transfer window after the spring is over with. I believe there's another one. After they change the rules every hour. So we'll see.
Things,
we'll see how that one plays out, because look, there are going to be guys that after spring practice is over with, they're going to sit there and go, okay, now where do I stand in all this? And that's the part you wait to see.
Yeah.
So there's a couple times this happens, but with the 103 person roster, the roster limit, there are obviously more scholarship openings. Okay. And again, I keep going back. Right now, college athletics is thriving more than ever, and it's a mess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're thriving in spite of themselves. The product's never been better, more popular. Bowl games, too many bowl games. Please, knock it off. Okay, 41 bowl games. Well, the 41st is coming. The first 40. You know what? How many had fewer than 1 million viewers? 3. Record bowl ratings. And I mean, not just the college football playoff.
The Duke's Mayo Bowl, the Pop-Tart Bowl, like
they had
all of them.
Alamo Bowl had 8 million viewers.
What, the ReliaQuest Bowl, Alabama, Michigan.
Right.
Like,
they have 4 or 5 million viewers. It's too many of them. The ratings say that you're full of it. Okay? You don't have to watch it. I'm never going to sit here and tell you have to watch it, but don't tell me I don't have to watch it. There are too many of them. I don't care. Don't ruin my fun. Right? I probably watch more bowl games this year than I have in recent years because the games were good.
And not just they were good.
They were entertaining. Rutgers plays, Kansas State? It was an entertaining game.
And along with that, yes.
Rutgers played, who they played? Was it Kansas State or Kansas?
I think it was Kansas State.
Kansas State. And then Miami played Iowa State. Incredibly entertaining game. I'm watching these games. They're good games. I mean, in terms of entertainment. I mean, I'm not saying like the purest form of football and it's all precise. No, it was fun. Navy plays Oklahoma. It's like it was a fun game to watch. It goes down to the last minute. All these games went down to 5 minutes to go.
You know what gives me hope as well is something that I think we may not have thought about a little bit, but now we can talk about more is the way the bowl game schedule works, because it used to be everything was like New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. There was just bowl games galore happening at the same time, same windows. So you had to flip back and forth in the games. Now they're spaced out a little bit and it gives you more time. And even the semifinals, Penn State Notre Dame, I believe it was 17 million viewers, I think, on a Thursday. A random Thursday in January. This is like people are like, oh, the ratings were terrible compared to Alabama, Michigan last year. That game was what, New Year's Eve or New Year's Day? So that viewership is going to be...
It was New Year's Day in the Rose Bowl.
New Year's Day Rose Bowl. That viewership is going to be gigantic. They got 17 million people to watch this game on a Thursday in January, the 9th, a date that doesn't have much meaning.
Right. And then the next day they had 20 million for Texas and Ohio State on a Friday night.
If that doesn't show you that you can get viewership on random days throughout the month and space out these bowl games like they have, where I think the Ole Miss team played like after on the 3rd or 4th or something like that. Like they're spacing these games out and it's giving people more time to watch these games. It's making them more standalone, where the Pop-Tart Bowl does shine, not just because of the branding of it, which is just incredible, by the way, but the Mayo Bowl and all these things. It gives bowls more coverage and more love than it has in the past.
So it's all, look, ESPN owns 17 of them. Okay, so you may see a sign in the back. If you see the sign in the back says ESPN Events somewhere, that means ESPN owns that game. They spread them out because it's ratings gold for them. Yeah, bing, boom, 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 boom. You know, they've got to work around Monday Night Football and their contract there and Sundays. But that they schedule so there's something going on all the time. Something going on all the time. And they do a great job and have done that for years of scheduling it. And you're like, oh, okay, well, this is pretty good. I'll watch that game tonight. There's nothing else on. And it's been a lot of fun. At least I thought it was fun watching this year for me personally.
Absolutely fun to watch.
And this championship game is going to get great ratings with a Notre Dame and an Ohio State matchup on Monday night, which is a natural football night anyway. At least since 1970, it's been a natural night. But you've got football, college athletics needs a semblance of structure. It's still messy. The portal's messy.
Well, if I may.
The time frames are messy. The NIL stuff is messy. I mean, it's like, I'm just being honest. It's messy.
No, I know.
It's all necessary, but it's messy.
Well, if I can quickly on the portal. Something else news-wise, they came out, again, while we were gone, not just Quinn Ewers going to the draft, but the FBS coaches at the American Football Coach Association 2025 convention completely supported the move to a single portal window from January 2nd through January 12th, starting in the 25-26 academic year. So it would eliminate the current portal windows in both December and April, make it one window, 10 days, instead of having 3 or multiple chunks of them. Makes it just one window, bing, bang, boogie, because as quoted in this ESPN article from David Hale is, of course, Bo Perbula, who had to enter the portal and couldn't play 2 games for Penn State, and also Marshall had to opt out of a bowl game due to the amount of players that left in the personnel attrition they faced after the regular season. Their coach left, all their players left, they couldn't play in a bowl game. So those 2 were cited here in this story.
Right. So they've got, there needs to be some structure to all this. You do, I think, eventually have to get to collective bargaining. Now, you're going to see more entry, maybe not at the Big Ten or the SEC level, but more entry of private equity. The Big 12, which gets half the TV revenue that the Big Ten does in the SEC, is actively looking at private equity. The American Conference, I don't know, I think they want to change their name, right? But Tim Pernetti has been very upfront saying, hey, look, private equity's got to play a role for them. Well, it needs to play a role, to be honest with you. Okay, if you don't need private equity, don't. Because, again, when you do that, you cede control of your product. But if I'm in the position of Tim Pernetti, if I'm in the position of Brett Yormark, Pernetti with the American, Yormark with the Big 12, and I'm fighting from behind economically, I need to look into that. If I'm Conference USA, I need to look into that. Okay? If I'm the ACC, I need to look into it. Because I can't make up the ground because I don't have the product to make up the ground. Arizona was something like $200 million at U of A, $200 million in debt. And somebody on the faculty said, look, maybe we ought to sell the athletic department. And is it John Jeffries is the president of U of A, something like that, said, you're right. We need to do something like that. We need to sell off the athletic department. He didn't disagree with the premise in a faculty senate meeting because that's how far behind they got trying to do all this. And but anytime you do that, if you're chasing the dollars, remember there are strings attached. What are the strings? How much control do you lose when you do that? That's why when I look at the SEC and I look at the Big Ten, right, they're in a position because of the strength of the product and the popularity of their product and the markets that they're in. Right? Now the South doesn't have but they're so entrenched with college football. Those states are great markets for college football. The Big Ten has the markets to go with the product. So the need for private equity not as great. But there are others where they're going to need private equity, but they've got to structure it in such a way where they're not handing over, because
Mm-hmm.
What does private equity want? Return on investment. They're not just doing it for the love of it.
Mm-mm.
They're doing it for the business of it.
Them dollar signs look pretty good.
Thank you for listening to Sports Talk with Steve Jones, a 7 Mountain Media production. Come back at 11 every weekday for analysis of the latest happening in the sports landscape. From college football to European soccer, Steve and Kyle cover it all on